Hello, this is Lincoln Easley here, and today we're on week 3 in class 221, and today we're going to be talking about lapping the rings for a scope, and this is so that way you can mount the scope. The reason for this is this is mainly for higher dollar scopes. When you're dealing with scopes that are up in the 500 and up range, you start doing what's called lapping, and there's 2 ways you can go about doing the lapping. One way is you can actually take the rings to a machine shop and you could have them lapped. The other way that you could have them done is you could actually buy a do-it-yourself kit and you could actually calibrate and do everything you got to do, and you can do it yourself. So in order to do this whole process, you would need your lapping kit, you need your compound. This is a rubbing compound. You're going to want some Q-tips to put it on the tool that you're going to be going over, put it on the rings. You're going to need your lapping bar, your calibration bars, so that way you can find out where it has to be and how close you are. The other thing you're going to want is you're going to want levels when you're done, so you can make sure everything's all level. And that is pretty much it. Otherwise, you need WD-40. One has to clean it so you can degrease and clean it all up. Paper towels, because after we're done, I have to take WD-40. You got to clean these up, and then we have to get it all done so that way it's all nice and clean. And then I can start mounting the scope. What this is going to do is it's going to do 3 big things. 1, it's going to help improve your accuracy. 2, it will prevent the scope from getting scratched up. And 3, this will prevent the scope from moving around a whole lot. So this is going to really help a lot. It's going to help improve the value of your weapon. It's going to help improve everything that you're working with. So we're going to get right to this, and we're going to start working on getting this whole thing done step by step. Okay, we're getting ready to make sure we're all good to go here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure the rifle is nice and level. So I'm going to put a level on this. And this is all magnetic, so that way it should stick pretty good. So if you notice, it's nice and it should be nice and level when I go to put these bars on. And there we go, it's nice and level. To adjust it, we can adjust it down here. So now we just checked that, we have to go through and we're going to tighten these up right here to make sure our rings are all nice and tight. If you notice with these rings here, they're all pretty much the same. They have a little issue where there's some inconsistencies on these where you have to go through and you have to rub this all out. You'll see they're all like rough cut and everything. So you have to rub all that in, and that's what's going to prevent this from getting any wear or any rubbing on this. So to do this, the first thing we're going to do is we got to tighten these down. Make sure they're tight, make sure they're good to go. So we're going to go through, we're going to make sure these are nice and tight. I heavily advise, do not do anything with the scope on here. Do not use the scope as a way of tightening, because you could damage your scope and cause a lot of damage to your scope if you do that. It's just not a good thing to do. Usually that's something that you would do when you're younger and everything, and when you think you know it all, and I've been there myself, and you'll find that your scope won't work as well. So now we got those on nice and tight. They don't have to be super, super tight. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the rubbing compound, or first we're going to take this before we get the rubbing compound. We're going to put these on, and we got to make sure it's nice and level. So first things first, we're going to get our deals right here, and we got to start tightening these down. And this is so that way we know exactly it's exactly squared up. It's nice and even. It looks good, and there's no possible way that this is going to be off. Now, when it comes to any kind of metal, woods, any kind of machine that you're doing, you're never going to get it 100% perfect. No matter how hard you try, no matter how good you are, it's never going to be perfect. You're going to try to get it as close to perfect as possible, and sometimes that's the best you can do. So we're going to get these all on, and then once we're all done, we're going to go through and we're going to check the measurement and see how close it is. All right, now we have them all lined up. They're working good. They look good. They're very, very close, as you can see. I mean, they're barely not even touching, but they're very close to touching. It's nice and level. It's level all the way around. So now that we got this all in, now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these completely, and we're going to go and put a rubbing compound in, so that way we could go through, we could rub it back and forth and smooth the whole thing out. And that way when we're all done, we'd be able to have it to where it's close to perfect for mounting the scope. So we're going to get to work on that, and we're going to start taking these apart, and that way we can start getting the rubbing bar in there, lapping bar in there, so we can start lapping this whole thing and get it all done. So we're going to start removing all these screws and getting it ready. We also want to know which one's your front one, which one's your back one. The two best way I could do it is, one, I could keep this one in this tray, this one in this tray. That way I know which one's which. The other way is you could put a piece of tape on here and put front and back. That's the other way. So either one of those ways will work really fine. So I'm just going to keep on removing these. I like to go as an X when I do these. That way I make sure they evenly come off. And then we're going to go through, we're going to start getting the lapping bar in there and getting the rubbing compound in there. All right, now we've just taken off the 2 bars that check to make sure it's centered and it's all good to go and it's nice and level. Now we're going to take our lapping compound that we have right here, and we're going to put that lapping compound inside the rings for the scopes. So we're just going to get our compound, get a Q-tip. We're just going to start rubbing it in. Get nice in there, nice and good. I never knew about this before. I never even heard of this until I actually looked this up and read about it. So I found it very interesting that you could do this to your scopes. So it's quite interesting knowing what you can learn from how detailed and how precise you're going on all this. I prefer to keep my fingers out if possible and not touch anything if I could possibly do that. Touching anything with your fingers could cause any oils, anything you don't want in there, and that could be a problem. So now we got the 2 lower ones done. Now we got to do the bottom ones. So now I got to get some more rubbing compound. I'm just going to rub it in. So like I said, remember you want to keep your front ones with the front ones, and you want to keep your back ones with the back ones. It's very important you don't mix these up. Keep these, because it could, 1/8 of an inch, 100th of an inch could affect your accuracy on your rifle. It's amazing how much difference it could be when doing something like that. So now we got 1 in there. And now we're going to get the last one, and then we're going to go through, we're going to put the lapping bar in. And then we're going to go through and start the process of getting these laps, so that way we can start mounting the scope. So we got 1 more to do. And generally when you rub this in, you want to make sure it's all covered up. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but you do want to get a good cover on it. When you go through and do the lapping process, you're going to be looking at about 90 to 100. There's no point getting 100%, but you're going to get pretty close to 100% when you're doing the lapping process. So there, now we got them all done. Now we're going to go through and we're going to put the lapping bar in, and we can start lapping the whole scope. So we're going to put the lapping bar in. So there it is. And now we're going to put this side in right here, and then we're going to put this side right here. So we're getting the front and back in. Now when you screw these in, you don't want to go all the way. You just want to go just enough to where it's snug. Then you're going to lap for a bit, then you're going to go snug again, and you're going to lap a little bit more, then you're going to go snug again. So I'm going to get this in, and we're going to get it nice and snug. And then we're going to go check it, make sure it's good. And then we're going to start going through the lapping process. All right, so now we got the lapping bar in place. We have these nice and loose. And when you go, if you notice, they're kind of loose. So you're going to lap it, and you're going to go back and forth, nice and easy. And as you go, it gets a little bit smoother. And you're going to go through, and you're going to tighten all these just a little bit. Not a whole lot, just a tiny bit. Because what this is going to do is it's going to gradually eat in to the metal, so that way you can get a deeper cut in there. And it's kind of like, works like a metal sandpaper. So it smooths everything out and gets all those burrs and imperfections out for the lapping process. It takes a few minutes to get it, so that's a little bit too tight that I have. So I got to just loosen it up just a tiny bit. There we go. And now we can start going through the lapping process till it smooths out again. When it comes to firearms, it's all about patience. You gotta be patient with what you're working with. You gotta know what you're working with. It's a mechanical device. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So now we got this a lot smoother. Now we're gonna go through and we're gonna tighten them down just a little bit more. There we go. Just gonna keep going back and forth. So you notice it's getting a lot smoother now. Okay, now we're gonna go a little bit tighter again. And a good way to know on how you're doing for this whole thing is you're gonna actually take them off. You're gonna look at the inside. You're gonna see how much is done. But it's like I said, there's two ways you can do this. One, you can do it this way, or the other way, you go to a machine shop. A machine shop, you may be able to get next to perfect compared to this, but you're gonna be paying out a lot of money because you're paying for their time to make this look good. So we're gonna go back and we're gonna go through and do this again. And we're almost done. All right, now we're gonna go through, we're gonna take this apart, we're gonna look at this and we're gonna see how well it comes up and we're gonna see how nice these are. So I'm only gonna do one side at a time because I wanna see how smooth they are. I wanna see if it looks good. And you can take the whole thing off and do it and check it, or you can go through and just go this way and call it good. So we almost got this one off, and we're going to check this one, and we're going to see how well this is coming apart, and see how well it's working for itself, and hopefully we have some really good rings that are all set for the scope, and that way we don't have any of the issues I was mentioning a while ago. You probably wouldn't do this for a cheaper scope. I mean, it's a lot of work for a cheap scope, but for a more expensive scope, this is what you're going to be wanting to do. So now that you look at that, that is almost completely perfect. It's pretty close. It's pretty consistent. It's nice and looks good and everything. So I think we're going to probably call that good. I think that looks really good. The burrs look good. And I think we can start cleaning that up. And we can start using this for what we're using it for. All right, now we're gonna go through, we're gonna take this all off, we're gonna clean these up, and then we're gonna start mounting the scope. All right, now that we just got the bar off, now we gotta clean it all up and get all the compound off. And it doesn't really take much, you just wipe it down, just get it all off, and you're good to go. It is also important to make sure you properly dispose of all your materials. You never know what's flammable, so I'm gonna get this all cleaned up. There we go. That's all cleaned up. We're gonna put that away. Now that we just got those cleaned up, I'm gonna get these all cleaned up. So that way I can take these and I'm gonna clean these up with a WD-40, get them all degreased and get it all ready to go for the next project. And then we're going to start mounting the scope after we're done here. So we're going to take these here, and we're going to start getting these cleaned up. See that one right there? You get that all cleaned up. Once they're all cleaned up, then we're going to put some WD-40 on there, and then they're all going to be done. So we got that one there. Now we got one more to do. Then we get our WD-40 out, we're going to clean them up, and then we're going to start mounting the scope, and then we got to do the next task, and that would be sighting it in. But first, we're just going to make sure we get the scope mounted so it's all good to go and it's all ready. And then these would be all lapped and all ready to go, and there should be no issues otherwise. And this will help with precision. This will help with everything, accuracy, trajectory. You have a lot of things working against you when you're shooting. You have gravity working against you, you have velocity, you have human error. So the more errors and the more imperfections you take out of your rifle, the better your accuracy will be. We came a long ways from 300 years ago where people just point and shoot to making shots of 200, 2,000 yards, 200, I mean, all these different yardage. People have gotten where they could shoot dimes, they could shoot pennies at 1,000 yards, and that is very impressive. People even nowadays, they still make shots like those, because when you go deer hunting, elk hunting, you want to make sure you make those shots. So we're going to go through and we're going to take these off, we're going to spray them all down and get them all cleaned up, and then we're going to start remounting everything. All right, now we just removed one, and I'm going to be doing the other one, so I'm just going to go through, we're just going to spray it down just like so. So when we spray it down, we're just going to wipe it down, get it all wiped up, get it all cleaned up really nice, so that way we can go through and remount it, put it back in. And as you can tell, we're getting all that grime off there and all that lubricant, so that way we can go through and it's all ready for mounting the scope. So we're getting this one all done. It's almost done here. There we go. Now we're going to go through and remount this one. So we'll get the scope, make sure we line it up, make sure it all fits the way it's supposed to fit, and it looks good. So that's perfect. So now that we got these on here, a lot of times when you're going through and you're tightening these down, you would actually use a compound that would actually tighten the screws in. I'm not worried about it so much because this isn't a real expensive scope. It's just an average size scope. It's just a good practice. It's a good lesson to learn for something like this before you do it on a real expensive scope. So now we're going to do it on the other rings, so that way we get these ones all done, and that way when we go to mount it, it's all ready to go. So we got these ones all done, all taken care of. Now we're going to go and do these ones here. Now when I was younger, I never knew about this. I mean, I was completely clueless when it came to mounting scopes. I had always thought you just put it on there, guess as close as you can, and hope you got it right. And I didn't realize there was extreme precision when it came to mounting scopes. So now that we got our rings done, now we're going to go through and we're going to start mounting our scope. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to set our scope up, make sure you have it on right. And I'm going to set the scope just right there. One big thing to realize is I have a charging cable I got to pull back. So I have to make sure this is far enough away where I get my finger in there real easy and then pull it back and then snap it back in there. A lot of times people have these scopes a little bit higher up, but this is what I have to work with right now. So this is what I'm going to be working with. So you got to make sure you get the back end in, and you got to get the front end in. And then I'm going to go through and we're going to start mounting the scope in there. And we'll have it all set, and then we're going to go through and we're going to do a level, and we're going to start leveling out everything when we go to put the scope in. So we're going to start getting this in and start putting these in, so that way all of our screws are put in properly. And I like to go as an X when I go in, and I got to make sure you don't go all the way in, because you want to get them somewhat sunk in to where they're sitting, but I can still turn the scope. All right, so we're gonna get these all set so that we can start adjusting the scope. All right, now we got all the screws in place. Now I can adjust the scope one way or the other. And then the next step I'm gonna do is we're gonna go through and we're gonna take a level. I'm gonna put a level right over the top of it. So we're gonna make sure this is nice and level. So what this is gonna do, this is gonna allow me to find where the crosshairs have to be. Because if your crosshairs are crooked and they're like this, what's going to happen is it's going to mess up your parallax when you go to shoot, when you try to shoot long distance or even short distance, and your shot will be way off. So you want to make sure you have it as close to perfect as possible. You're never going to get it perfect, but you're going to sure try. This is what's going to really make the difference when it comes to shooting. So right there we have it pretty close to perfect. And then we're going to check the rifle itself. The rifle is nice and level. So this is a really good setup right here. We are all ready to go. Now we can start tightening these screws in. And what I like to do is I like to go really easy when doing this. My theory is slow is swift and swift is fast. What I was always told when it comes to firearms, whether it's reloading, dealing with scopes, building, anything, is this is not rocket science, but you treat it like it's rocket science. And that there is just as important as is following the rules. Because if you go through and you're not doing safe things with these things, or things happen, you can have a firearm blow up on you. You could have the wrong charges put in, and then you could have a world of problems with everything you're dealing with, and you do not want that to happen. So we have this one almost tightened in. It's almost good to go. And that's pretty tight right there. And I think that's looking pretty dang good. So now we're going to do this side here. Get this side all tightened in. And we are just about done setting our scope here. So we just got to go through and just hand tighten these a little bit more. The other thing that's important to realize is you don't want to go too tight. I do not have one on me, but I'd recommend a torque wrench on doing this, because if you go too tight, you could actually damage your scope. And if you go not tight enough, it could move on you. So trying to find that happy medium is really hard to find, but in this case, it looks like it's going to work pretty well for me. And there we go. We actually have a good scope on. It's ready to go. It's nice and level right here. Got a nice level right here. I don't see anything off on this. It looks really good. It's nice and level. The rifle's level. Everything looks good. I can't ask for anything better. So this is a really good setup. If I look through the scope and I go through and I flip that back, I look into it. Yeah, I can actually see the crosshairs. They're nice and level with the rifle. It looks good. I think this is going to work out really well. I look forward to going through and sighting this in, and that's going to be the next step, is sighting the rifle in. So this is going to be the whole project that we're doing when it comes to sighting the scope in and getting it all ready for the parallax, getting it ready for the scope mount, and getting the ring set up. All right, now we have the scope all done. It's all set up. It's not sighted in yet, but we have the scope on and ready to go. So the next step would be to sight it all in. We have the rifle nice and level. We have the scope nice and level. We have both of our rings are lapped and ready to go. So this scope is ready to go. I would recommend for anybody that does this, do this on a cheaper scope. Do it on that first. Learn how to do it before you go through and do it on a more expensive scope. This is a brand new project for me. I've never done this before. So doing this gives me the experience and the education to learn how to do this. And as I said before, you have a lot of imperfections when it comes to firearms. You have human error and you have mechanical error. And then you also have what I would call element error. So element error, you have gravity working against you, you have velocity, you have windage, you have all those things working against you when it comes to accuracy. When it comes to human error, people tend to shake, they tend to move a little bit, and that's where you have a lot of problems. You have eyesight you have to deal with. So you have a lot of things you have to deal with when it comes to human error. And then when it comes to mechanical error, you could have rifling issues. Your rifling has to be as close to perfect. You have your scope you're trying to get to closest perfect. And you have a firearm that you're trying to get to closest perfect. And you could also go as far as ballistics. So ballistic error, where you're trying to get your ballistics as close to perfect as possible for what you're trying to get. So you have a lot of things that you have to consider when it comes to having a rifle shooting extremely accurate. But if you can go through and you can eliminate as many of these errors as possible and try to mark them down as low as you can make it to where it's a lot easier for a shooter to be able to make the long shot that you want to make. So thank you so much, and you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.